Sorry, ma'am. This card won't work. She laughed, easy, careless, sure of herself. Then her phone rang. Which boutique are you in? He asked. Her smile slipped. That's my wife's store. And in that moment, she understood exactly who had just ruined her. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and kindly hit the like button. It truly means a lot to us. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy. Let's dive into this unforgettable story. When Victor Hale slid the card across the marble counter, he didn't lower his voice. He didn't need to. They were alone in the glow of his penthouse kitchen, the city glittering beyond the glass walls like silent witnesses. Celine leaned back against the counter, confidence radiating from her, already savoring the life she believed was opening before her. Use it, Victor said casually. Buy whatever you want. No explanation, no limits, no warning. Celine picked up the black platinum card, running her thumb over the embossed numbers as though touching a promise. She laughed softly. You're serious? Victor shrugged, pouring himself a drink. Why wouldn't I be? You deserve nice things. What he didn't say, what he had never said, was whose name anchored that card, who had structured the accounts, who had insisted on layered permissions, traceability, reversals. He had laughed at that once. Celine stepped closer, her voice playful. Your wife won't mind? Victor scoffed. Nadia barely notices anything anymore. She lives in her little world. Fabric, mannequins, silence. She wouldn't recognize power if it stood right in front of her. Celine smiled. Weak, invisible. Forgettable. She liked the sound of that. She slipped the card into her purse like a trophy. I'll make you proud. Victor kissed her forehead absently, already distracted, already convinced of his control. Neither of them noticed the silence that followed. It wasn't peace. It was anticipation. Nadia Hale arrived at her boutique just after sunrise, as she always did. The city outside was still waking, but inside, everything was already aligned. Soft lighting, polished floors, racks of dresses standing in careful order. Nadia moved through the space with calm precision, adjusting sleeves, smoothing silk, correcting the smallest details. This place was hers. She tied her apron and began folding fabric behind the counter. Victor had come home late again. Another excuse, another unfinished conversation. She no longer chased answers wrapped in lies. The bell above the door chimed. Laughter entered first. Loud, careless, then heels. Nadia didn't look up right away. The women were familiar types. Confident, overdressed, entitled. One stood at the center, claiming the space with her gaze. This place is nicer than I expected, the woman said. Nadia glanced up briefly, then returned to her work. To Celine, she was nothing more than staff. Background. Invisible. Celine liked that. My boyfriend gave me his card, she said loudly. Told me to buy whatever I want. Nadia's hands slowed, just a fraction. Not because of the voice, but because of the certainty behind it. Celine moved through the boutique as though it belonged to her, pulling dresses from racks without care. Her friends filmed and laughed, voices bouncing off the walls. This one's beautiful, someone said. Celine glanced at the tag and scoffed. If it's here, it's affordable. She didn't bother lowering her voice. My boyfriend hates small thinking, she said, admiring herself in the mirror. He says life's too short to stay with women who don't know their worth. Her friends murmured approval. He's tired of carrying someone who contributes nothing, Celine continued. Once the paperwork's done, he's taking the money. The company, too. Nadia kept folding. Arrogance always mistook silence for weakness, Celine laughed. Imagine working this hard just to be replaced. The boutique didn't tense, it sharpened. Nadia glanced up once, unreadable, then returned to her work. Celine gathered the dresses and approached the counter, smiling in victory. Ring it up, she said. All of it. The dresses landed in a careless heap. Celine didn't ask for the total. Nadia scanned each tag, folding the garments with deliberate care. When the card slid across the counter, black and familiar, Nadia's fingers paused, not in shock, but recognition. She remembered choosing the design. She remembered insisting on safeguards. She remembered Victor laughing. Just a moment, Nadia said calmly. Celine waved her off. Nadia stepped into the back office. The door closed softly. She unlocked her phone, opened the app, confirmed authorizations. Every account, every cent, transferred, legal, clean, final. When she returned, Celine was still laughing. Nadia placed the card on the counter. I'm sorry, she said gently. The card won't go through. Celine laughed again, sharp, dismissive. Try it again. Nadia tapped the terminal and turned the screen. Transaction declined. Celine's smile faltered. The network must be slow. She leaned closer. Swipe it again. Her phone rang. Victor. What did you do? He demanded. Every account just got frozen. I didn't do anything, Celine whispered. I just tried to pay, with the card. A pause. The joint card? Victor asked. Yes. Silence. Which boutique are you in? Celine lifted her head, and for the first time she really saw the woman behind the counter, not as background, not as staff, but as the one who had just ended everything. Nadia met her gaze calmly, and Celine understood too late that something irreversible had already happened. Celine stood frozen, phone pressed to her ear, the boutique suddenly too quiet. Which boutique are you in? Victor repeated, slower now. Careful, as if the wrong word might break something already cracking beneath him. Celine swallowed. I don't know the name, she said. Crescent row, high ceilings, white walls, a lot of silk. There was a sharp inhale. Nadia's, Victor said. The words struck hard. Celine blinked. What? My wife's boutique, he said hoarsely. That's her place. The world tilted. Celine's eyes lifted to the counter, to the woman she had dismissed, to the calm hands folding dresses, to the quiet authority in her movements, as if nothing in the room existed without her permission. No, Celine whispered. Victor laughed once, hollow. She built it. The accounts too. That card. His voice dropped. It answers to her. Celine's chest tightened. You said everything was yours. I was wrong, he said. The bank says an authorized holder transferred everything. Her knees weakened. Behind the counter, Nadia reached for her coat, unhurried, unshaken, like someone closing a door she had always known how to lock. Celine finally understood. She hadn't embarrassed a wife. She had walked straight into her hands. Celine ended the call with shaking fingers. The boutique no longer felt indulgent. It felt judicial, as if judgment had already been passed. Nadia slipped on her coat. No rush, no drama, no need. Wait, Celine said. There must be a mistake. Nadia looked at her, not with anger, not with pride, with certainty. There's no mistake. My boyfriend said. Nadia lifted a hand, gently, not to silence her, but to stop something unnecessary. Whatever he said, she replied, wasn't yours to spend. The words cut deeper than shouting. Celine's phone buzzed again. Victor. Missed calls stacked like debts. Nadia walked past her, paused at the door once. Tell him, she said quietly, the accounts are frozen because I allowed them to exist. Then she left. Celine remained in a room full of things she could no longer afford. Money, confidence, lies. That night, the apartment felt like a trap. Celine sat curled on the couch when the door burst open. Victor stormed in, rage-frayed and useless. What did you do? I didn't do anything, she cried. I used the card you told me to. You don't even know my wife, he shouted. Other women check. You didn't. You said she didn't matter, Celine sobbed. You said you'd take everything. She built everything, he whispered. I just signed. Silence crushed them. Celine slid to the floor. Victor collapsed into a chair. The power was gone. Only exposure remained. Victor sat long after Celine's sobs faded. Stop, he muttered. She rocked, repeating, I didn't know. That account was leverage, he said quietly. Not just money. You said it was yours. I believed it was. He stared out at the city. She warned me once. I didn't listen. What happens now? Celine asked. He had no answer. She understood then. She hadn't lost a man. She had attached herself to a lie. Victor didn't sleep. Memories surfaced. Nadia explaining structures, safeguards, protection. He had laughed, called her boring. Now the words cut clean. She wasn't loud, he said. She built things. I mistook silence for weakness. So what now? He closed his eyes. Nadia hadn't acted out of anger. She had acted out of ownership. Morning came quietly. Nadia brewed coffee, watched the city wake. Somewhere, Victor unraveled. She didn't need updates. At the boutique, whispers followed her. She unlocked her office, reviewed confirmations, safeguards activating as designed. There was no thrill in it. Only closure. A junior designer hovered by the doorway. Mrs. Hale, should we be worried? Nadia looked up gently. No, she said. Everything here is protected. The girl nodded, visibly relieved. Nadia turned back to her screen. She thought of Victor's voice, panicked and unfamiliar, of Celine's arrogance collapsing into confusion, not with satisfaction, but with clarity. She had not destroyed anything. She had simply stopped carrying what wasn't hers to carry anymore. When her phone buzzed with Victor's name, she let it ring. Once, twice, then it stopped. Nadia closed the file, stood and smoothed her jacket. The quiet that followed wasn't empty. It was complete. And somewhere in that silence, a line had been crossed that could never be uncrossed. By noon, Victor had run out of people to call. Banks redirected him to lawyers. Lawyers redirected him to documents. Documents led him, inevitably, back to one truth he had spent years avoiding. Nothing moved without Nadia. He arrived at the law firm just before afternoon, tie replaced, posture stiff with the illusion of control. The receptionist didn't smile when she announced him. That alone unsettled him. Inside the conference room, Nadia was already seated. She wore ivory, simple, tailored, deliberate. No jewelry beyond her wedding ring, which caught the light as she turned a page calmly. 2 lawyers sat beside her, files open, pens ready. They stood when Victor entered. She didn't. "Sit," one of the lawyers said politely. Victor obeyed. Nadia finally looked up. Her gaze was steady, unburdened by anger or nostalgia. It unnerved him more than shouting ever could. "You froze everything," Victor said, trying to sound composed. "No," Nadia replied evenly. "I exercise my rights." She slid a folder across the table. Inside, timelines, ownership structures, signatures, his, hers, dates he remembered, and dates he had ignored. "The company," she continued, "was built with my capital. The accounts were designed by me. You were authorized to operate within them, not to claim them." Victor's throat tightened. "You didn't have to do this." "I did," she said simply, "because you assumed I wouldn't." Silence settled over the room, heavy and final. Victor realized then that this meeting wasn't a negotiation. It was a conclusion. Victor left the law firm hollow. The city outside moved like nothing had happened. Cars honking, people laughing, life continuing without him. That hurt more than the meeting itself. He had always believed his presence mattered, that his absence would be noticed. Now, even his collapse felt private. By the time he returned to the apartment, Celine was packing. Suitcases lay open on the bed, clothes folded hastily, carelessly. The woman who once treated the space like a throne now moved like a guest overstaying her welcome. "You're leaving," Victor said flatly. Celine didn't look up. "I don't think I have a choice." He laughed once, bitter. "You didn't hesitate when you thought the money was endless." That made her stop. She turned slowly, eyes red but sharp. "You lied to me," she said. "You told me you owned everything. You told me she was irrelevant. I told you what you wanted to hear, and I believed you," she snapped, "because you needed me to." The words landed harder than he expected. Celine zipped the suitcase with trembling hands. "I didn't steal anything. I just trusted the wrong man." Victor felt something twist inside him. Anger, shame, loss, all tangled together. "You should have known better." She shook her head. "No. You should have been better." Silence filled the room again, familiar now, merciless. Celine lifted her suitcase. "I thought I was stepping into power," she said quietly. "Turns out I was just standing in someone else's shadow." She walked past him without another word. Victor stood alone, surrounded by the ruins of choices he could no longer undo. Victor spent the next 2 days in offices that smelled like paper and consequence. Every lawyer told him the same story in different words. Calm voices, sympathetic nods, unmovable conclusions. Nadia's filings were airtight. Prenuptial clauses activated, asset trails documented, authorizations logged down to the minute. "She didn't improvise," one attorney said, flipping through a thick folder. "She executed." Victor clenched his jaw. "There has to be something I can challenge." "There is," the lawyer replied gently. "Your assumptions." That night, Victor sat alone in a rented office space, scrolling through old emails. Messages from Nadia, clear, careful, often ignored. "Let's review this again. I don't feel comfortable leaving this unprotected. Please confirm before signing." He had replied with jokes, with impatience, with silence. Now, the silence answered back. Across town, Nadia met her own legal team, not in panic, but in planning. She reviewed timelines, nodded at confirmations, signed what needed signing. When one lawyer asked if she wanted to pursue damages or public action, she paused. "No," she said after a moment. "I want separation, not spectacle." They exchanged looks of respect. When she left the building, dusk painted the sky in soft, bruised colors. Nadia breathed deeply, feeling something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Relief. Victor, meanwhile, stared at his phone, hovering over her name. He didn't call. For the first time, he understood that access, once lost, was rarely returned. The statement went live the following morning. It was brief, measured, impossible to misread. Nadia Hale, founder and creative director of Hale Atelier, formally announced a restructuring of ownership and leadership. The language was calm, professional, free of emotion, free of accusation. Yet within hours, the message spread faster than any scandal ever could. Clients called, investors emailed. Industry contacts who had once addressed Victor directly now asked for Nadia by name. She answered selectively, not out of spite, but out of focus. In interviews she declined, in meetings she accepted. Her posture never shifted. She spoke of vision, continuity, growth. She did not speak of betrayal. Those who knew how to read between lines heard everything anyway. By noon, Victor's name began disappearing from places it once lived comfortably. Email signatures, board access, calendar invitations, a quiet erasure, precise and complete. He watched it happen from his apartment, phone in hand, scrolling through messages that no longer included him. A colleague he'd mentored sent a polite note, wishing you well during this transition. Transition. The word felt like mockery. At the boutique, Nadia walked the floor slowly, greeting staff, inspecting displays. Nothing had changed, and everything had. For the first time in years, she felt the space fully align with her breath, her pace. Power, she realized, wasn't loud. It was uninterrupted. As she locked her office that evening, Nadia paused, hand resting on the door. This wasn't revenge. This was reclaiming authorship of her own life. And the world was already adjusting to the edit. Victor's name still opened doors, just fewer of them. And the ones that opened now did so cautiously, like people unsure whether to let him in or keep him out. He sat across from a former partner in a quiet restaurant, the kind he used to frequent without checking prices. The conversation was polite, distant, filled with pauses that said more than words. You understand, the man said finally, folding his napkin. This isn't personal. Victor nodded, forcing a smile. Of course. But it was personal. It was always personal when respect drained before money did. His accounts were restricted. His cards worked only within limits that felt humiliating. The watches he once wore like armor now felt heavy, unnecessary. He stopped wearing them. At night, he lay awake in unfamiliar rooms replaying moments he'd dismissed as insignificant. Nadia reviewing spreadsheets at midnight. Nadia correcting his assumptions without raising her voice. Nadia signing documents he never bothered to read. He had believed love meant being admired. Across town, Nadia reviewed new contracts with steady focus. She declined celebratory dinners and interviews, choosing instead to expand her production line, mentor junior designers, and finalize a second location. Success followed her quietly. Victor tried calling once. The call didn't go through. That was when he understood the true weight of what he had lost. Not money, not status, but proximity to a woman who had once made space for him without needing him. And space, once reclaimed, was rarely surrendered again. The city adjusted to Victor's absence faster than he expected. Meetings went on without him. Decisions were made in rooms he no longer entered. His name surfaced occasionally, usually in the past tense, usually followed by a pause that suggested discretion rather than admiration. He tried to rebuild. He attended networking events with forced smiles, offered ideas that once would have been seized immediately. Now they were acknowledged politely, then set aside. People listened, but they didn't lean in anymore. That was the difference. Influence, he learned, wasn't volume. It was trust. And trust had quietly followed Nadia. One evening, alone in his apartment, Victor opened his laptop and searched her name. Articles filled the screen, profiles of Hale Atelier, interviews praising Nadia's restraint and clarity, commentary on her quiet dominance in an industry known for chaos. There was no mention of him, not even as a footnote. Across town, Nadia ended a long day by walking through the boutique after hours. The lights were low, the space peaceful. She ran her hand along a rack of new designs, stronger cuts, bolder lines, clothes that didn't ask permission to exist. She felt no urge to check her phone. The absence of his voice had become normal, comforting even. Victor closed his laptop slowly, the weight of irrelevance settling in. He finally understood that what Nadia had taken wasn't his future. It was her past, and without it, he had nothing solid left to stand on. Celine's world shrank fast. Friends who once flooded her phone with invitations now responded hours later, or not at all. The boutique laughter, the attention, the thrill of being seen evaporated the moment the money stopped working. Bills arrived with cold precision. The apartment Victor had shared with her was no longer an option. She moved into a smaller place across town, dragging suitcases that felt heavier than they should have. Luxury had trained her poorly for survival. She sat on the floor one night, surrounded by unopened envelopes, staring at her reflection in the dark screen of her phone. The same face, the same ambition, but stripped of illusion. She replayed Victor's words in her mind, "You should have known better." And then she remembered her own response. "You should have been better." That truth hurt more. Celine had believed proximity to power made her powerful. She had confused access with ownership, performance with security. Now, standing alone in a borrowed life, she finally understood the hierarchy she had ignored. She hadn't competed with a wife. She had underestimated a woman. Across the city, Nadia reviewed a new contract without knowing Celine's thoughts, and without needing to. The collapse had already completed itself. Some lessons didn't require witnesses. They simply arrived, and stayed. Victor's last hope arrived in the form of a quiet email from a senior attorney. "We can review this one final time." He clung to it. The office was smaller than the first firm, less polished, more practical. The lawyer didn't offer coffee. He didn't offer optimism either. He read in silence, flipping pages with a steadiness that made Victor uneasy. Finally, he looked up. "There's no loophole," he said. Victor leaned forward. "There has to be something. Timing, procedure, something she missed." The lawyer shook his head. "She didn't miss anything. She anticipated everything." Victor swallowed. "All transfers were authorized," the lawyer continued. "All accounts trace back to her capital. Even the assets you believed were separate were layered through structures she designed." He paused. "Frankly, I've never seen someone this prepared." Victor let out a shaky breath. "So that's it?" "That's it," the lawyer said. "You can contest it publicly if you want, but you'll lose, and you'll look worse doing it." Victor leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Walking out of the office, he felt something finally loosen. Not hope, but denial. The fight had ended long before he realized it had begun. Nadia hadn't acted emotionally. She had acted legally, and legality, unlike love, didn't waver. That night, Victor deleted drafts of angry messages he never sent. He didn't reach out again. For the first time, he accepted the truth fully. This wasn't something he could undo. Nadia didn't celebrate. There were no champagne bottles, no victory dinners, no dramatic announcements. Instead, she rebuilt quietly, brick by brick, decision by decision. The second Hale Atelier location opened 6 months later, larger, brighter, purposefully placed. Nadia walked the floor on opening day, greeting staff, answering questions, adjusting displays. She knew every detail because she had approved every detail. Clients noticed. "You seem lighter," one longtime partner remarked. Nadia smiled politely. "I am." She began mentoring younger designers, especially women who had been taught to doubt their instincts. She spoke to them about contracts, about ownership, about how silence could be strategic and preparation could be armor. Across town, Victor watched the news on a muted television, his name absent from every headline that mentioned her success. He worked now as a consultant, introduced with careful phrasing, his influence reduced to advice rather than authority. Celine, too, watched from her smaller apartment, scrolling past images of fashion shows she no longer attended. The distance felt permanent. Nadia, however, felt no need to look back. Her life had not exploded into something new. It had simply realigned. And that, she realized, was the most honest kind of victory. Nadia caught her reflection one evening as she locked the boutique. The glass showed a woman standing straight, shoulders relaxed, eyes clear. For a moment, she didn't recognize herself, not because she looked different, but because she felt unfamiliar in the best way. Lighter, unburdened. She remembered another version of herself once reflected in that same glass. A woman who waited, who softened her voice to avoid conflict, who convinced herself that patience was the same as peace. It wasn't. Peace, she understood now, required boundaries. She walked home slowly, letting the city breathe around her. The noise no longer overwhelmed her. It moved past her, not through her. For the first time in years, she didn't rehearse conversations in her head. She didn't anticipate disappointment. At home, she poured a glass of water and sat by the window. Victor's name crossed her mind, not with longing, not with anger, but with clarity. She saw him as he was, not as she once hoped he'd become. Across the city, Victor stared at his own reflection in a darkened window. He looked older, Smaller. A man stripped of borrowed confidence, finally forced to face the quiet truth he'd avoided for years. The difference between them wasn't punishment, it was growth. Nadia stood, turned off the light, and went to bed without checking her phone. Some reflections were meant to be acknowledged, then left behind. The message came late at night. Nadia was already in bed, a book resting open on her chest when her phone buzzed softly on the nightstand. She didn't reach for it immediately. She had learned the difference between urgency and interruption. When she finally glanced at the screen, Victor's name sat there, quiet and small. "I'm sorry." 2 words. No explanations, no defenses, no requests. Nadia stared at the message longer than she expected to. Not because it moved her, but because it confirmed something she had already accepted. This apology wasn't for her. It was for him. A way to ease the weight of regret he now carried alone. She thought of all the conversations she had rehearsed in the past. All the times she had wished he would see her, hear her, choose her. Those versions of herself felt distant now, like characters in a book she'd finished reading. Nadia locked the screen. She didn't respond. Across the city, Victor waited. Minutes passed, then an hour. The silence that followed was louder than rejection. It told him everything he needed to know. An apology, Nadia understood, didn't require a reply to be complete. Some words were meant to land and stay where they fell. She placed the phone face down and turned back to her book, her breathing steady. Forgiveness, she realized, didn't always mean reopening a door. Sometimes it meant confirming it was closed for good. Time did what confrontation never could. It created distance. Weeks passed, then months. Victor stopped checking his phone for messages that never came. He learned how to fill his days without rehearsing what he would say if Nadia ever called. Slowly, painfully, he accepted that she wouldn't. He downsized again. Smaller apartment, quieter neighborhood, no doorman who knew his name, no concierge who pretended not to notice the change. The anonymity bruised his pride, but it also stripped away illusions. At night, he replayed moments he could never revisit. Not the fights, but the calm ones. Nadia working beside him in silence. Nadia correcting him gently. Nadia staying when leaving would have been easier. He understood now that her loyalty had been an investment. One he'd squandered. Across the city, Nadia's life expanded, not outwardly, but inwardly. Her days were full without being frantic. Her nights were quiet without feeling lonely. She filled her calendar with intention, not obligation. Occasionally, someone mentioned Victor's name in passing. She neither flinched nor lingered. The sound carried no weight anymore. Distance had done its work. It had softened regret into acceptance for him, and sharpened clarity into peace for her. Some endings didn't need closure. They simply needed space. The final papers were signed on an ordinary Tuesday. No courtroom drama, no raised voices, just ink meeting paper in a quiet office where the air smelled faintly of toner and certainty. Nadia read every line before signing, as she always did. Victor signed where he was told, hands steady, eyes distant. When it was done, the lawyer nodded once. "You're officially divorced." The word landed differently for each of them. For Victor, it felt like something being taken, another title stripped away, another door closing. He stood slowly, unsure what to do with his hands, with his future, with the version of himself that no longer existed. For Nadia, it felt like a release. She walked out of the building alone, the afternoon sun warming her face. There was no urge to cry, no urge to look back, just the quiet satisfaction of finality. Later that evening, she sat in her living room and reviewed a single notification on her phone. Confirmation of ownership transfer, complete and irreversible. Her name stood alone now, no joint titles, no shared authority. Victor, meanwhile, packed the last of his things from the apartment they once shared. He paused in the doorway, taking one final look, not at the furniture or the view, but at the absence, the space where Nadia's steadiness had once anchored his life. He closed the door behind him. The withdrawal was complete, not just of money, but of permission. Nadia stood alone in her boutique after closing, the lights dimmed, the city humming softly beyond the glass. She walked slowly between the racks, fingertips brushing fabric she had chosen, designed, protected. Every piece in this room carried intention. Nothing here existed by accident, not anymore. She paused at the counter, the same place where a black card had once been slid forward with careless confidence. The memory no longer stung. It simply existed, like a lesson properly learned. Victor had believed power was something you displayed. Celine had believed it was something you accessed. Nadia had always known the truth. Power was something you allowed. She picked up her phone and reviewed the final confirmation one last time. Ownership verified, accounts secure, authority unquestioned. Her name alone stood where it always should have. Across the city, Victor sat in his quiet apartment, staring at a life that no longer responded to his voice. Celine scrolled through social media, watching other women live the fantasy she once borrowed. Neither of them reached out. They didn't need to. The story had finished speaking. Nadia turned off the lights and locked the door, the click echoing softly in the empty space. The card had never been his power. It had been her permission, and she had withdrawn it, along with his name, his money, and the life he thought he controlled. I'm glad you made it to the end. I hope you enjoyed the story. Please go ahead and generously hit that like button and subscribe for more captivating tales like this. We'd love to hear from you. What lessons have you learned from this story? Share your thoughts in the comments below. See you in the next story.